This is Karen with NewClevelandRadio.net, and it is time for How to Super Age with Elise Marie Collins. And Elise, the last couple of times you and I have done one-on-one show. I love when you have a guest because it opens up the dialogue and we learn so much more. So, who do we have today?
Yeah, well, we have Anthony Hamilton, and the last two shows, if you want to look them up, they are all about how to super age, about finding your purpose, getting better sleep. And these are things that you can continue to revisit and refine. Super aging is not something you do in one day, it's a lifetime, and you can always refine your trajectory in your life. Even if you're feeling down, you're feeling tired, you're feeling depleted, you're feeling like you're too old, you're never too old. And in fact, our guest today is going to help us rethink, like, how do we think of our memories, of our future, of what it is to be old. I'm going to introduce him. He's a really amazing thinker. He's the former professor of communication at Capilano University in North Vancouver, Canada, and the author of Mind Power. I'm going to start over. Anthony is former professor of communication at Capilano University in North Vancouver, Canada, and the author of Mind, Time, and Power. This book describes the results of 30 years of research into how our thoughts, feelings shape our life. He's the co-author with Brian Tracy, wow, of Cracking the Success Code. It's a best-selling book on Amazon. And Anthony's passion is to awaken people to their natural ability to improve their lives by employing cutting-edge mental tools. So I can't wait to hear what you've got to say, Anthony. Do you have anything you want to add to your introduction? So I didn't read it all because it's a lot. You've got so many accomplishments, but I think we want to get right to, like, how can you help our listeners? So anything you want to add or start with a tip?
Yeah, no, that's great, Elise. Thanks very much. Very nice to meet you and Karen and your listeners on super aging, right? We're all aging. I suppose that's a positive thing. We can't avoid it. No, I think what attracted us initially was when you found out about a series of talks I was giving to seniors on the new science of happiness. And that's the key phrase, right? It's a new science of happiness. Now, these techniques that we're going to talk about today, they're not necessarily new. As a matter of fact, some of them are probably thousands of years old. But the difference is that now we have science, right? Because in the mid-90s, using a new machine called a functional MRI, scientists were able to look inside the brain and watch people thinking, which they never were able to do before. And so these scientists were looking for the place in the brain where memories are stored. That's what they thought, that memories are stored in the brain, right? The brain is kind of like a recording, and memory is a recording of something in the past. Well, what blew their minds was when they realized that, number one, memories aren't in the brain. At least they're not in the brain in any place that they could find. But the other thing that blew their minds was the fact that when we think of the future, our mind is doing exactly the same thing as when we're remembering something. So basically, thinking of the past and thinking of the future are exactly the same thing. And this blew their minds because they expected that they were going to find a difference between remembering something and daydreaming about something or fantasizing about something or planning something. And what they realized was that they're both exactly the same thing. So since then, this is in the mid-90s, since then, they've realized that the mind works exactly the same in the past as in the future. And these scientists coined the term mental time travel. to describe this process. So they say that, the mind is not so much a computer as it is a time machine. Well, this is something I discovered for myself in around 1980, because I had a dream when I was 10 that I saw my future in advance. I saw myself at the age of 32. And when I got into my early 30s, a lot of the things in that dream that I had seen came true, or they were coming true, So this blew my mind. So I spent 20 years from the age of 10 when I had the dream until the age of 32, trying to figure out how it's possible to get information from the future. And what I discovered is that when you're thinking of the past or when you're thinking of the future, what you're doing is you're forming a connection. So for example, if I'm 32 and I'm remembering having a dream as a 10-year-old, everybody goes, oh, well, that's normal, because the memories are in your brain somewhere. You can remember what happened. But how does a 10-year-old get information from a 32-year-old, which is what happened to me? So when you realize that thinking is a connection, then of course it all falls into place. Whether you're thinking of the past or thinking of the future, it's like making a phone call to your past self or to your future self. So here we are now having this Zoom conversation, and you're where you are, which I'm not sure where you are, but and I'm on the West Coast in Victoria, British Columbia, and so we're connected. So the information is going back and forth. So what they realized is that's what thinking is.
So when you broke this down for the seniors, because this is all so mind-blowing that some of our listeners might be like, whoa, what can I do with this? So I'd love for you to just tell that story of, and I'm sure you do this not just in one senior home, you're continuing to do this, but what did you tell the residents to do? Like, what's a practical application for this idea, especially if we're over 50, 60, 70, 80, we're in our 90s. How can we use this? Because we're not going to be 10-year-olds thinking about the future. We're going to be, maybe 80-year-olds thinking about the past.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So, the most practical thing is when you realize that thinking of the past and thinking about the future are the same thing. What that means, really, is that the past is still there. We can remember the past, so it's still there, right? It hasn't gone anywhere. It isn't physical anymore, but it's non-physical, right? And the future is there too. So the second thing that the scientists discovered is something called neuroplasticity, which means that any behavior you repeat starts to change the brain and it becomes automatic, like learning a new language or learning to play the piano, right? So what I was teaching the people, and what I've been teaching people for a long time, is that when you remember what I call a past success, you connect with that past success, the positive energy, feeling successful, feeling happy, feeling lucky, feeling grateful, feeling blessed, whatever it might be, those feelings come into your mind and into your body. They stimulate a bunch of neurochemicals and you feel good just because you're remembering something positive. Now, when you understand neuroplasticity, you realize that thinking is a behavior. Remembering a past positive event is a behavior, right? So just like playing the piano or something like that. So when you think of this past event and you stimulate these positive feelings and you feel lucky and happy and grateful, your brain starts to change. Well, when you think of the future, you're going to think of the future feeling luckier, feeling happier, feeling more successful. So your feelings about the past and about the future change. So that's what I was teaching people. And so basically my basic technique, my fundamental technique is for people to make a list of what I call past successes. Now, a past success can be anything, getting a university degree, learning how to ride a bicycle, learning how to fry an egg, learning how to bake bread, learning how to speak another language, or learning how to play the guitar. It doesn't matter. Anything that you consider a success, anything that makes you feel good when you think about it, put them on that list, you know. And then the next thing is that you need to just simply remember that, think about that thing, let the, you know, the images, the sounds, and the feelings come in, and that will start to make you feel better automatically, right? And so that list of past successes is a magical technique, right? Now, people tend to think, and I tended to think this too before I discovered this, is that, well, so what? You know, that thing, I graduating from high school, you know, that was 30 years ago, 50 years ago, 60 years ago. You know, how can it possibly mean anything? Well, it means something because it makes you feel good. And you can learn, this is really the key, you can learn to feel better.
Mhm. I love that. It's powerful and yet simple, and it makes so much sense. And I love that you really underscored it with, we tend to, you know, sort of diminish these accomplishments. Like it's almost like considered polite, like we don't want to brag. But what you're saying is that's going to change our brain. It's going to, you know, literally the neurochemicals that are being I'm just going to say excreted, but you know,
Right.
your hormones that are going to our brain, it's going to change that. And that's so important because I know, you know, in our culture, I live with my parents and they're both pretty positive and happy and persevering. But a lot of my friends say, oh, my mom is depressed, or, you know, they have a really negative outlook of aging. And that's part of the reason why I love to do this podcast, to write books, because I really want to change the paradigm, because the external world does give us a lot of negative messages about aging, or how we're supposed to be, or our life is over. So this is a great way to, I don't know if I want to say combat it, but like change it in our, you know, change it internally, so that I think that's going to attract more positivity into our life.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah. So, you know, because the old psychological paradigm, right? The way that psychology was created literally a couple hundred years ago, it was based on Newtonian mechanics, because that's the way most people understand the world, you know, cause and effect, right? My present is the way it is because of the past. You know, I had this bad experience and therefore I feel bad about it, right? That's cause and effect. Well, that's Newtonian, but Newtonian mechanics has been replaced over 100 years ago now by a fellow everybody's heard of named Albert Einstein, right? And Albert Einstein was the one who said the laws of time and the laws of space are the same. So, in other words, there's no space and there's no time, there's space time, right? They're all part of the same four-dimensional matrix, right? Well, what that means is, and this was a key idea for me, because I realized analyzing that dream, you know, what does it mean? Well, the thing I know about space, he said the laws of space and the laws of time are the same. So what's true about space? Well, information passes through it. Information is passing through space right now between you and me, right? So that's one of the things that is true about space, is information passes through it. And what I realized is that, well, thinking is information passing through time. So when I remember the past, the images, the sounds, the feelings, the voices, the memories, they all come back to me, right? Through my imagination, which is a pipeline. The imagination is not a screen in my mind, really. I mean, that's a part of it, but it's a connection, right? The same as my TV has a screen on it, but it's a connection. I'm, you know, when I watch TV, I'm connected to some server someplace or some studio, right? So the mind works exactly the same way. Now, the trick is that neuroplasticity, scientists can measure the changes in your brain. If you repeat a new behavior, like learning a new language or learning to play the piano or something like that, the scientists can see the changes in about 30 days using a functional MRI. But you might not notice it, you know. So I tell people, go for 100 days, you know, practice this simple little past success list exercise. 5 minutes, 3 minutes a day is plenty. Just do it, and then do it repeatedly over and over again. And over a period of a couple months, you will notice big changes in your feelings and in your emotions.
I just wanted to ask, I know Karen looks like she's nodding her head. She probably has a question too. So I wanted to interject and see if Karen has a question. And I also wanted to say a quick question is, when we read this list, do we need to just think about it, or is there anything else we should do? Just remember it in the happy way or anything else?
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, there's two ways that you can remember something. I mean, at least two. There's probably 1,000, but at least two, right? When I remember a past success, I can either remember it as an observer. I can sort of see myself doing that. Oh, I got my university degree. I can see that, right? Or I can get into my body in the past. I can just sort of mentally get into my body, and I can re-experience that as though I'm there, right? So when I think about my walking across the stage at the university and getting my first degree, right? I can remember looking out at the audience and getting that degree handed to me by the president of the university. It's like I'm right in my body. So when you do it that way, when you practice sort of being your past successful self in that experience, right? Then you get the feelings, and it's the feelings that make the difference. So you want to sort of breathe in and feel those feelings, and it's the feelings that trigger the neuroplasticity. So that's the way to think about it. And it's funny because we're used to thinking that a negative event makes us feel bad, a positive event makes us feel good. Well, Shakespeare hundreds of years ago said, nothing is negative or positive, but how we think about it. So this is a key point, that any event that you think about, either in the past or the future, it's not negative or positive, it's neutral, except for the meaning that you put on it, right? So you can decide to have a positive meaning. Now, even if something is bad, a big mistake, a divorce, getting fired from a job or something like that, anything that you can think of, if you can ask yourself a question like, what did I learn that was positive about this? And if you can think of something positive, then all of a sudden, that's not a negative experience anymore. It's a positive learning experience. And that shifts the meaning, and that shifts the feelings of it.
It's interesting. As I'm listening to you, Anthony, I started coaching a year ago. And that has been my philosophy with my clients. For many years, I had a laundry list of all the terrible things about me, what I've been through. And so when I would think about them, I would feel worse. But the day that I don't know what triggered it, but the day when I looked at something that happened to me that I always thought was negative and bad, but I found something good in it, I could now smile about that. I could now say, hey, you know what? Life isn't all that bad. If we go back and we look at things, we can make our life better.
It's better than the alternative. That's the thing, right? Yeah, that's exactly right. Now, that's one of the most important things that I've learned, and I'm sure that you'll agree, one of the most important things you've learned, that you can feel good about something that you used to feel bad about. Now, that is profound, right? Because you realize, hey, Shakespeare was right. Nothing is good or bad, but the way I think about it, right? So if you think about it as a positive lesson, what did I learn from that? And you'll think of something. I learned what to avoid. Don't do this again, or don't put your hand there again. As long as you can get a positive lesson from it, then it's a positive thing, or at least it's less negative, right? Now, one of the things on my past successes list is a yo-yo contest, right? I remembered I won a yo-yo contest when I was 12. Now, this was no big deal. I mean, it was just one day. We were in the mall, myself and a bunch of kids, and this guy from the yo-yo company, I think it was the Whammo company, he was demonstrating yo-yos. So he taught us 5 little tricks. He gave us each a yo-yo, and he demonstrated these 5 tricks. And he said, I'm going to come back here next week, and anybody that can do these 5 tricks, I'm going to give them a prize, right? So of course, I went home and I practiced and practiced and practiced, making it sleep, rocking the baby in the cradle, walking the dog, And so when I went back to the mall the next week, man, I was excited, And so he gave us a chance to do these tricks, and I was the only one that could do all 5 tricks. So I won. I won this yo-yo contest. And I won this little trophy. It was like a little plastic trophy. It's probably worth about 10 cents. But to me, it was a win, right? Now, of course, I forgot about that thing for decades. I mean, it was just a thing that happened once when I was a kid, no big deal. But when I started filling out my past successes list, I started remembering that yo-yo contest. And so, in addition, this is part 2 of the exercise with the past success list. Rather than just thinking about the past success and the feelings, what does it mean? What kind of meanings can you put on it? Now, we have a choice. We can decide what it means. I could decide it means nothing. It's just a stupid little contest as a kid, it means nothing. Or I can have it mean, hey, I'm smart. I can learn a complicated thing and I can win. I can compete against other people and I can win. I'm a champion. I've got what it takes to learn difficult things and win at it. Now, all of those feelings and all those meanings are things that I put on that silly little yo-yo contest, playing around with my past successes list. So those feelings of being a winner, being a champion, able to learn complicated things, being smart, all of those feelings and meanings and things come back to me when I'm thinking about that yo-yo contest. Now, because of neuroplasticity, see, here's the thing. It changes your brain, right? Well, what does it mean to change your brain? Well, one of the things it means is it changes what you see. You start to see things in a different light, right? So not only the past, when you think of your past successes, you'll remember more and more and more of them. But when you look at the future, you tend to look at it with a more positive mindset. So when I go into something new now, some new project or some new goal that I'm working on, I can tell myself, hey, I'm a winner. I have the ability to win at this. This is tricky, but I can learn it. I can figure it out and I can win. So that attitude from the past starts to color my whole future too. And I start to see things with a new set of eyes.
I love it. It's so powerful. And I know, I want to mention to our audience that you have a YouTube channel where you do even more of your teachings, because I think the audience, whether they're listening or watching, can hear that, you're a professor, so probably you could lecture for hours. And
that's true. Wind me up, I'll go all day.
I know. You're teaching, but I wanted to ask a question. I know that you taught, or one of your students, I think you're calling him a student, decided to run a 10K race, and you're in Canada, so a 10K race. How many miles is that? To a
I think it was
race?
6 miles, yeah.
6 miles, yeah, 6 mile race, and I don't think he's ever run, and he's 80. And so tell us a little bit about that, because I know that's a fun story.
Yeah, well, that's a friend of mine called Phil. I've known him for a long time. And so 2 years ago, actually January 1st, 2022, a friend of mine, a podcaster, her name is Jessica Coulthart. She and I started this weekly live Q&A podcast session for people who have my books and take my online courses and things like that. So we decided, okay, we'll try this weekly live training, question and answer session. And we thought, if it goes for a month or two, that'd be great, right? Well, it's still going. I mean, it's like 30 months now. And all of those sessions have been recorded. They're all up on my YouTube channel. And so my book is called Mind, Time, and Power. That's one of my books, Mind, Time, and Power. So it's about the mind and how your mind works as a time machine and the power you have to change your feelings, change your life, achieve your goals, that sort of thing. Change your past, change your future. So mindtimeandpower.com, and that has links to my Amazon books and my YouTube channel. And that YouTube channel now has about 450 videos on there, I think. So there's lots of resources for people to learn about this.
And tell us about I think you forgot to tell us about, I talked about your YouTube channel, but your friend.
Right. My
Yeah.
friend Phil, that's right. I got
Phil.
sidetracked there. Yeah. So anyway, Phil decided that he was going to celebrate his 80th birthday by running in this 10K, right? 10-kilometer race, 6 miles. And so this was about, I think it was in September the year before. So the race was in April last month. So he started just, walking and then trotting and then running a little bit. And eventually he joined like a running club. And so that was good because they taught him, how to pace yourself, and you don't have to try and do your best. Don't do the fastest, just walk and then run. And then if you get a little tired, start walking again, And so anyway, he did that until April. So 6 or 8 months he was practicing with these runners. And he ran the 10K race. He finished it. And he said, I think there were 36 people in their 80s. And he was number 13. So, he wasn't first in his class, his 80 class, but he beat some people, right? So of course, that's a huge past success for him, right? And so the idea about feeling good and changing your brain and changing your perception is that you are more likely to set these kind of goals, right? And so the importance of a goal, this is really key. When you started this podcast, and Karen was saying that, she started coaching a year ago, right? Well, what that does when you do something like that, that's a goal, right? So what's a goal? Well, a goal in my book, it's like a memory of the future. You connect to the future. You connect to what I call your future self, who's achieving that goal, right? And you can dialogue with the future self the same as you dialogue with your past self. How do I feel? What does it mean? What do I need to do to achieve this goal? And your past self and your future self will tell you what to do, right? So your future self tells you, well, you got to solve this problem. Maybe for Phil, it might have been join a running club, get some coaching, right? Buy a new pair of running shoes, right? So the idea then is that if you set goals, and everybody needs to be, in my book, they need to be a goal setter, right? Now, it doesn't have to be running a 10K race. It can be, for example, starting a past successes list. That's a goal. And I tell people, work in your binder, your workbook. One of the pages is this past success list. Work in that list a minimum of 1 minute a day. That's all it takes, right? Write down 1 or 2 things. Now, something that people are familiar with, because this is a technique that's been around for a long time, is keeping a gratitude journal, right? So one of my other friends from our Saturday podcast, her name's Kathy, she decided that she wanted to change her life, so she started keeping a gratitude journal. And so she started and she wrote down 3 things that she's grateful for every day in her gratitude journal, right? Well, after about a week, she ran out of things to say. I'm grateful for the coffee. I'm grateful for the chair I'm sitting in. I'm grateful for my home, Well, then you have to kind of stretch your mind a little bit. You have to think, what else am I grateful for? Well, I'm grateful for my parents. I'm grateful for the air. I'm grateful for the trees, whatever it might be. So she did this for about 3 months. And she started to feel noticeably different, right? Well, one day she was out for a walk and this bird flew over. And she saw the bird and she thought, I'm grateful for that bird. Now, think about that. She had taught herself by doing this gratitude journal process to feel grateful about things. And she was feeling so grateful that when she saw a bird, she felt grateful. Now, she'd been seeing birds flying overhead all her life. They never made her feel grateful before. So that's a demonstration. And in my book, it's proof that this process works, right? So as I said when we started, this is not necessarily new information. What's new is the science that says, now we can explain it, right?
I love it. I don't know if Karen has more questions, but when you say it's both ancient and new, and that we have this science to back it up, it's like yogis were thinking this. I'm a yogi. I consider myself a yogi or yogini.
Right. Yeah.
And that's what,
Yogini.
yeah, that's what the ancient yogis were saying, just controlling the mind, getting rid of the fluctuations, which are things where we start to doubt, but just like connecting to that pure positive energy that's going to change literally our brain, our neurons. But then the yogis, at least maybe they saw that in some in some way, but they didn't perhaps have the same machinery to examine it, like you said, the MRI.
Well, that's the difference, right? They didn't have the scientific proof. So it
Mhm.
was considered woo-woo, mysticism, crazy thinking, right? But they were absolutely right. It's about thinking. I mean, the Buddha said, we make our world with our thoughts.
Yeah. They didn't have the proof, but they did have the proof. It just wasn't this proof wasn't holding up in in the century. I would say the 21st century we're changing things, but maybe in the 20th century. But
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Well, some of the, when I was doing research trying to explain that dream I had, right? How can I know the future in advance, right? Well, I read a lot of books on mysticism and ESP and telepathy and mind power, and there's a ton of books out there. There's a famous book that was the driving force behind the movie The Secret, which is about the law of attraction, right? So the law of attraction is a term that a lot of people are familiar with. And what it simply means is that when you start to set goals and you start to think in this positive way, you start to see evidence and you start to see ways that you can get more of what you want, right? So that's what they call the law of attraction. And what it means is that your brain is now changed and you're activating something in the brain called the reticular activating system, which is simply something that picks up on stuff in your periphery, right? And now you notice it where before you didn't notice it, like that bird. All of a sudden it's like, hey, there's a reason to feel successful, right?
I like the way you explain it, because The Secret, I know sometimes people will say, oh, I did it wrong. I didn't, or that's the law of attraction is a better way to describe it. The law of attraction. Oh, I didn't attract the right thing and I did it wrong. It's like in your paradigm of connection to memory, it's all about, oh, it's kind of like, well, I dropped the call, or like, I'm just going to keep making more memories. I'm just going to keep dialing those numbers. I'm just going to keep texting or whatever metaphor, rather than like this, because it takes us again out of that paradigm, that Newtonian paradigm of like, this happens and that happens. Why did it happen? And we're so stuck in that. I know we're getting towards the end of our show, and I wanted to see if Karen, did you have any other comments or questions?
Well, the big thing that I'm hearing, and I'm so glad hearing it, is that I grew up in a generation when, you didn't make mistakes. I mean, you made mistakes, but you weren't supposed to make mistakes. And if you made a mistake, sometimes you had your hand slapped or something else. It wasn't until about 15 years ago that I finally gave myself permission to make mistakes so I could learn how to do things better. And I think that's probably what you're talking about. We can open up our mind, we can see what's around us. And instead of degrading ourselves for, hey, I shouldn't have been in that marriage, or I shouldn't have done whatever, look at it and say, okay, maybe that didn't work for me, but what will? What can I learn from that? And
yeah, that's exactly right. So, like I said a minute ago, we have the power, which we don't recognize usually. We have the power to change the meaning of something, just like Shakespeare said, right? So, one of the things that I've done, and I teach all my students to do this, is to develop a list of feelings that you want to feel. For example, feeling lucky, or feeling proud, or feeling loved, feeling okay, feeling successful, right? So I've been doing that for years. And what I tend to do is I record a little bit of music, like meditation music, and some voice, and I'll say, for example, I put together a meditation called Feeling Proud, right? So I go down to the ocean every day. I live very close to the ocean here. And so I was down there one day sitting in my car, and it was raining. And so I thought about, hey, I know what I want to feel proud, so I'm going to make a little meditation about feeling proud. So I just turned on my cell phone and I recorded this little voice track. When I think of my past, I feel proud. When I think of my goals, I feel proud. When I think of my parents, I feel proud. When I think of my past successes, I feel proud. When I think of my past failures, I feel proud. Well, your brain kind of goes, what? What do you mean you feel proud? You failed. Aren't you supposed to feel stupid? And then you think about it a second, and your brain goes, well, actually, you had the courage to try it, so that's a good reason to feel proud. So okay, so you feel proud. So I feel proud about my failures, right? So I recorded this on my cell phone, and I put some music to it, right? And I listened to it every day for about 3 months. And now I feel much more proud. But I'll tell you the funny thing, one day I woke up and it was raining outside, and I heard the rain on the window, and I woke up and I went, I feel proud. And I thought, that's amazing. I didn't realize I was programming myself to feel proud when I hear the rain, because the rain was beating on the roof of the car when I made that recording. So I thought, that's amazing, right? I feel proud just listening to the sound of the rain on the window.
I love that. And I want to say, you told me that story when we last talked, Anthony, and I did something similar. Like I recorded a short 3-minute meditation and I turned on the faucet, and it's kind of loud, but I always love listening to meditation sounds where there's like running water or rain. It's just very soothing to me. So I just thought, well, I could try it. And I'm wondering if that's going to happen to me. It hasn't happened yet, but just to have the water sound in the background. So if it's raining, or if maybe you're by the ocean, you can try that. I also know you have a YouTube channel, you have your books. I also see you have a workbook, so many resources. We're going to link in the chat how to connect with you. Is there any final words you have for our audience? Or I'm going to recommend everyone tune into the YouTube channel and keep practicing this stuff, because our guest today is not just telling us, some fact or something like that we just put in a book in our mind, but it's something that you want to integrate in your daily life, which actually many of our guests are doing that. And it's really fantastic information. So yeah, just giving you the mic for any ways to connect and give us any more gems.
Yeah, that's great. So the trick is then, 90 days, right? 100 days. So listen to that recording for, 2 or 3 months, and you'll start to notice changes. So again, my website, mindtimeandpower.com, that's the best way to get in touch with me. Now, I give people a free 10-session Mind Power course and a workbook that they can get for free just by joining my mailing list. And they can do that through that website as well. So that's that's the best way to get in touch with me, and people will get that workbook that I'm talking about. The past successes list is one worksheet. There's about 25 worksheets in there. They just fill those out and they make a list of their dreams and their goals and things like that. And then over a period of time, their thinking will shift, their feelings will shift, and their life will shift, because your life is what you feel, right? If you feel like a failure, you're a failure. And if you feel like a success, then you're a success. I mean, it's that simple.
Love it. Any final words, Karen?
No, this was absolutely wonderful. And I am going to get out to your website today, and I'm going to check everything out. And again, that'll all be in the show notes. So no excuse for our listeners not to find the information.
That's terrific. And of course, people can join my live calls on Saturday. They can do that. There's links on my website too. And the final thing is, I would love to come back and see how your listeners are using this material and changing their feelings and changing their life.
Great idea. Let's check in a few months. Thanks so much.
Okay, everybody, have a great day now. Bye-bye.